Hello and welcome to my studio. In this video I'm going to show you how I made this image, the ubiquitous dandelion clock. There are many examples of this subject. However, I've tried to get a different take on a common theme. And once again, it's the careful use of lighting together with a small amount of post-processing that has produced this picture. And in this video I'm going to show you exactly how I did it. Okay, so this is the subject. Standard dandelion clock that you can pick out of your garden at this time of the year. Now, one of the many problems with doing something like this is just how you mount the subject. So what I've done is decided to mount it on a piece of steel rod. The dandelion stem is hollow, therefore you can insert the rod up the stem like this, and then you have a solid foundation on which you can mount your subject. Okay, so following on from that, here's one I made earlier. So this is just in a lab stand, and I've bent the rod here so that I can position it in line like this. Therefore, if I put the camera here, the rod itself should be hidden from the camera. Okay, something like that anyway. So with that set, let's have a look at the camera. So I'm going to be using this full-frame digital SLR. Now this has a 24-70 zoom lens on the front of it, but it also has a 12mm, which you can just about make out in here, extension tube. This will allow me to focus closer so that I can fill the frame with the subject. Okay, so we're just going to pop that on here, like so. And now, as usual, I'm just going to frame up the subject. So first of all, I'll just zoom that in a little, just to make the subject a bit more prominent in the frame. Something like that. And now I'll just focus that quite carefully so that we pick up on just the detail around the edge. About there should do it, I think. Okay, so with that set, what I can do now is just turn the camera on. And we can use the software here just to have a look at what settings are on the camera at the moment. So it's in full manual mode. I'm using a shutter speed of 1/250th of a second, which is the flash sync speed for that camera, ISO 200, and an aperture of f8. So with no flash, I'll just grab an image just to make sure we don't get any contamination from the house lights. Yep, and that's fine. So we have full control over any light which is going to be going onto the subject, because without any flash, I'm getting no picture with those settings. Okay, so the next thing to do would be to look at placing a light. Now what I'm going to do is actually place a light right at the back here. So I'm going to backlight the subject. Okay, so for that, I'm going to use this Profoto head. This is a small 2-pack system. So it has a control pack we can just place on the table here. And I'm positioning this so that it's in line with the camera and the lens and the subject. Now, with all this being on the same axis, in theory anyway, when this is set up correctly, you won't actually be able to see the head itself because it will be covered by the subject. Now in this case, I'm going to need to in effect modify the head slightly and make the aperture here a bit smaller, but I'll come to that in a moment. So just for now, we just place the head about there, and we'll turn that on and take a test. So we'll select that head and just turn it on like so. Okay, so at an arbitrary energy level, next thing I'll do is just grab an image and we'll see what we get. Okay, so we're getting a perfectly fine rendition of this dandelion clock, and as I said, the subject has covered the flash head, so you can't actually see the flash head as such. So what we have here is a perfectly acceptable photograph of the dandelion head, but overall it's either black or white. There is no colour detail in there. So to introduce some colour detail, what I can do is make use of an optical effect that you can get with a very, very small light source, a point light source. And if you create that, that can introduce a little diffraction, which can give you some colour in the image. Let me show you what I mean. What I'm going to do is make use of this old shutter. Now, it's not the shutter mechanism that I'm going to use, it's the actual aperture. So if I close the aperture blades, you can see that the hole in the centre here gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Now I'm going to use this just as an example to show what can happen as you make the aperture smaller and smaller. If you were to try this yourselves, you could simply cut an aperture, a little circle, out of a piece of card. Okay, so I'm going to mount this on the front of this flash, just about here. Okay, so with that mounted, it's absolutely critical that this is all lined up properly. So in order to help me do that, what I'm going to do is just go into live view here on the software, like that. And I'm just going to turn the modelling light on the flash head, like so. So there you can see from that picture that, if anything, the head is slightly high. I'm getting slightly more of the light coming through at the top than the bottom. So I'm just going to adjust this very slightly. Until it's equal all the way around. There we are, that's looking okay. So with that done, I can dispense with live view and the modelling light and grab another image. Okay, so in this image we're starting to get the effect that I'm looking for. You can see that the image is a lot better exposed. That's due to actually cutting down the amount of light which is coming through, because I've got the aperture here, which is effectively making the head smaller. But also you can see in here that we're starting to get the beginnings of the diffraction effects. So what I'm going to do is make the aperture here a bit smaller. So I'm going to take it from wide open to an arbitrary level like that. So I've just made that a bit smaller. And we'll grab another image and see what we get. Okay, so you can see in this image that although obviously it's got a lot darker, I've cut down quite a lot of the light coming through from the flash head, I am getting some colour in here. So to compensate for the amount of light coming through now that I've made the aperture smaller, I'm just going to increase the energy by, 2 stops? Let's do 2 stops. I'll grab that again. There we go. So that's come back, but we still have the colour. So to emphasise that colour a bit more, what I'm going to do is make the aperture here even smaller. So we'll just take that a little bit smaller like so. Now obviously I'm going to need to increase the energy again, so I'm going to add another stop just as a guess to start with, like so, and we'll just grab that again. There, now that's really starting to come together now. We're getting quite a lot of colour in here, and this is all caused by having such a small aperture. Let me show you the sort of size that it is at the moment. So this was the aperture wide open. This was the first stage I used, and this is what I'm using now. So it is quite a small hole that is in there. So don't forget, you don't need all the complication of having a full iris. You can just cut a hole in a piece of card to get the same effect. Alright, so back to the image. So we're getting all the colour, but the depth of field here is very limited. So what I'm going to do is increase the aperture on the lens on the camera from f8, where it is now, all the way up to 22. Now that's a 3-stop increase, so I need to add 3 stops of energy to the light. Okay, so now with all these things set, so I'm at f22 on the lens, I've increased the energy, I'll just grab another image and we'll see what we get. Yes, now we're getting all the diffraction effect. It's generally a little low still. I might just add another stop of energy to the flash. So we'll just see what that looks like just with one more stop of energy. Here we go. Just grab that again. There we are. That's looking pretty good. So this is what we had before, and this is what we've got now. Okay, so as far as capturing the image is concerned, that's it. What I'm going to do now is go into Photoshop and just do a little bit of post-production just to enhance it a bit. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop, and the first thing I'm going to do is just make a duplicate of the file. Now, the way I prefer to do this is just to go onto the layer here, right-click the mouse, ask for a duplicate layer, and ask for a new document. And we can call this Dandelion Clock. There we go, just click on OK. And Photoshop has made a new file, called it Dandelion Clock, up here. This way I can dispense with the camera original, and I have my own file which I can play with. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is add an adjustment layer. I'm going to add a vibrance adjustment layer, and I'm going to actually take the saturation and the vibrance up to maximum, like so. So this really does bring out all the colour which has been created by having such a small aperture for the light to pass through, giving a diffraction effect on the fine hairs of the subject. And once again, you could leave it at that, but I think that's a bit gaudy, and you can actually enhance the image by taking this back a little. So the way to do that is to go onto layers, and then we're going to just invert this mask. So on the vibrance panel here, just click on the mask icon and come down to where it says invert, and just invert that, like so. So now wherever I paint in white on this mask will reveal the effect of that layer. So making sure that white is selected as the foreground colour, I'll pick a paintbrush and we'll go for a reasonably large paintbrush. I want something which will cover quite a lot of the dandelion clock. Make it very soft. Center it on there, and we'll just click that through. So I'll just click that a few times. There we are. So that's starting to bring the effect out, like so. There we are. So if I just turn that on and off, you can see the effect that is having. So having done that, there's just one or two more things to do. I just want to get rid of this distraction from the side here, and there's a tiny bit of the stand showing at the bottom. So because it's a black background, all I need to do, add another layer on the top here, and making sure black is selected as the foreground colour, I'm literally just going to paint those bits out, like so. Like that. So with that done, just finally, I'm just going to select a crop. So click on the crop tool. Now I'm using this for video, so I'm going to select a specific ratio of 16:9, like so. Now I'm just going to center that up a little, just like that. There, I think that's very good. Click on OK, and there we have it. So that's my take on the ubiquitous dandelion clock. And I think that's come out a little different, and by using the diffraction effects of having a very small aperture in your light and placing the light directly behind the subject, I've been able to bring out all this colour, which I think has enhanced the end result. OK, well, I hope you liked seeing how I made that image, and if you like watching these sort of things, do click on the other images as they appear, and don't forget to subscribe. Oh, and click the like button. Thank you very much for watching.